You're with Clement Manyathela.
702.
But right now, we start something new on the show. A new monthly feature. We are going to call it Exploring Spirituality with Vusumzi Ngxande. Vusumzi is the author of Journey Kwantu, Exploring African Spirituality and Identity. I've read his book. I've listened to his podcast. I mean, he is really insightful. I mean, the book, and some of you have asked the name. I've posted it on my socials as well. It's not just an academic exploration, because it's rooted in extensive historical research, but it's also quite personal. It's very practical, which is what I've enjoyed about the book. And we had him on the show last year, and a lot of you appreciated what he shared with us, and you asked that we bring him back. And so we decided that actually we're going to start a feature to explore spirituality, because as I have said to you many times, I think we're lacking in that aspect as a society, as human beings, because being a human being is not just about your physical body, and maybe you take good care of that through going to the gym, you wash every day, but there's another element of you. And I feel like that element is not being taken care of, because the conversations around spirituality and our soul and what inhabits what cohabits in our bodies, I feel like those conversations are so uncomfortable. And I want us to make those conversations normal. That's why we've had a series on the show about what happens when we die. And we spoke to all different belief systems, several of them. And we asked them, according to your belief systems, what happens when we die? Why are we so scared to have conversations about that? Why are we so scared to explore our spirituality? Why are you so scared to even ask questions about your own beliefs? Whether you believe in African spirituality, whether you believe you're in Islam, whether you are a Christian, whether you read the Torah. Why is it that we are so linear in how we approach this concept of spirituality, and we're not explorative? And by explorative, I don't mean that you've got to abandon what you believe in, but be curious enough to know. So today, we start this feature. We're going to do this every single month, once a month, with Vusumzi Ngxande. It's Exploring Spirituality, and today we're going to start by looking at religion in a changing world. What does your religion or belief systems mean to you today? Very often, we like to believe that faith is personal, that we believe how we pray, how we engage with the divine. We believe it's an intimate exchange between ourselves and God, untouched by politics or history, the world around us. But our faith is not formed in isolation. It's shaped by the times we live in, the conflicts that we witnessed, and by the collective fears and hopes of this generation. So I'd like you to join this conversation on 011-883-0702. Do you think religion itself is changing and evolving, or are we witnessing the birth of new spiritual forms? You can send your WhatsApps as well on 072-7021-702. Vusumzi, welcome back to the show, man. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. And thank you for doing this with us, for committing to guide us through these conversations over the next couple of months. And all of us are seeking here, right?
Right.
We are trying to explore. Nobody really has the answers. We're trying to start conversations that often are uncomfortable.
Yes. And I actually think questions are always a very strong place to start from. Don't treat your questions as a hindrance or as something that is a problem. Treat them as opportunities. Treat them as pointers on a map. Yeah. So it's best to go where the questions are leading.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's begin with, and we'll talk a lot, obviously, about our context as South Africa. Where does religion begin for us, and how does it then influence what comes next?
The interesting thing about religion in our country, if we were to stick to like Christianity, more broadly, is that if we were to speak to Christians today, their view is that Christianity exists now. You know, they're Christians now, they have a relationship with God, they have a relationship with Christ now. But the reality of it is that Christianity has a history, and it has gone through several phases, you know. And the other reality is that maybe for about only in the last, let's say, 40 to 50 years or so, have black people in particular had the latitude to choose to be Christian of your own volition, to say, I am choosing. It is not as a system that was sort of imposed on you whereby you did not have a choice, you know. And because of that, we need to be cognizant of the fact that our belief is shaped by not just our personal relationship with God, as you mentioned, or with Christ. It's also shaped by our circumstances, you know. Part of this topic was inspired by this conversation that I had with my mother a couple of weeks ago. It's a story that she tells all the time about the violence in the early 90s, if you remember, you know, the political violence. So she would travel to Joburg, because I live in the West Rand. She would travel to Joburg by train, and then during the peak of the violence, you know, she would tell us of these days where there would be violence on the trains. There would be people shooting at the trains. You know, they would be outside, and the people in the trains would then have to duck. You know, so you would have these people inside the trains, and then there's like bullets flying through the trains, through the windows, and then there are people inside, like my mother. They have to take cover under the chairs in the train, and in that moment, her prayer was, "Can I get home to my children alive?" You know, that was her prayer. That wasn't an intimate prayer between a person and God. That was the prayer of a black woman who lived in a particular time, whose life was shaped by particular influences, you know. And because of that, her faith, her religion took a particular form. And when I look at, let's say, today, parents of today, not many people pray to get home alive. Their structure of faith and their relationship with God is shaped by other things, you know. And part of the reason why I think we need to start here is that when we pray, when we engage with spirit, even, and this is also including African spirituality, you know, I'm just using Christianity as an example. When it is shaped by those things, what we tend to forget in the way that our faith is shaped by our circumstances, we forget that a lot of the time, especially as black people, our problems, our prayers are stemming from systematic problems, right? We're like, you know, I'm praying, I need to improve my relationship with God. I need to be more faithful. But now your problems are systematic. You don't have issues with your faith. I can give you an example. If you have a business, right? If you have a business that is struggling because there's load shedding or there's power cuts and it is struggling, when you pray to God, what are you asking Him for? If you want to go consult, you know, with a healer, what are you asking them to solve? That my business is struggling, and it's struggling because we don't have water in Midrand. What are you asking them of? Right? Because your problem is not faith. Your problem is not what you believe in, you know, but ultimately you feel that it needs to be responded to. If you're a woman who has an abusive husband and you live in a system where GBV is rampant, what are you praying for? Because the issue is not you, and the issue is not your partner per se. The issue is the society that you live in. And I think when we are not cognizant of the fact that the world is shaping our faith, we tend to lose our faith or our connection with spirit and with the divine and with God, because we are not cognizant of the fact that the problems that I'm having are not a spiritual problem. They're actually a systematic problem. And because now we can't separate these things, we are in a place where we feel that spirituality in and of itself is useless.
Yeah. I want to ask you about this geographical argument that often gets placed, during these kind of conversations about being born in America or Europe and Asia or Africa. That influences the kind of religion that you take up.
Yes.
I mean, there are, of course, exceptions.
Yes.
Where someone who is born in India won't take up, won't be Hindu.
Yes.
They may be Christian. There are exceptions where someone who's born in Japan or who's in America or in even Italy may be a Muslim, for instance. But those are exceptions. So then how do we reconcile this idea of, because one of the things I've had to learn as an adult now is, wait, this Christianity path that I've taken, when I took it as a child, it was not because I chose it. I did not have a relationship with God. I didn't really understand Him. I found this thing in my family, and this is how we lived, and that shaped how I believe. But when I grew up, I realized that I need to make my decision, which is why I learn, I ask the questions, and then I choose now to be a Christian, and I believe that is my decision. But there are many people who have grown up and were born into religious systems. And to this day, they follow the religion of their ancestors, of their parents, and not so much what they truly believe. What do you make of that argument? And what does it say about what we believe as a society if that geographical argument and element can influence really what you believe in?
That's such a great question. Clement, me and you right now speaking English. That means something.
Exactly.
Right? There's a whole history between why your name is Clement.
Yes.
There's a whole history about why me and you are speaking in English. If we're a couple of 100 kilometers from here, we'd be speaking Portuguese.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We are influenced by our history that takes away certain kinds of choices that we could have made. Right? And this is very true even with religion. But now, me and you can't choose not to speak English. We can't say, no, we have 11 official languages. The reason why we are choosing to speak this language is that there's a practicality to it. There's a way in which it helps us navigate our particular circumstances, right? So in terms of the idea of faith, I think for people who are deeply religious, it would be something that is difficult for them to process, to say, you can choose a particular faith in that this is how it helps you navigate, and that in the same sentiment, you can choose not to partake in a particular faith because it does not help you. And this is where the idea of religious tolerance becomes important. There's a way in which we don't understand that certain belief systems suit certain people better than it suits others. I believe that there are people who are physiologically built to be Christian. There is a way in which that faith, the way it is constructed, its principles resonate with certain people. There are certain people who are born to be Muslim. Even if they didn't know about it, when they hear about it, it just clicks, it just makes sense. There are people for whom Buddhism could have been best, but the idea of resonance is not of spiritual resonance is not something that we speak about a lot. So in answering your question, there is a choice in belief regardless of your background. But the reality is that will that belief help you in the particular function that you, in the particular circumstance?
Help you navigate those circumstances.
Yeah, some people are Christian because it is the most convenient thing to be. I remember I had a cousin who became Muslim at some point, and I asked him, he was living in Limpopo at the time, and I asked him, and then when he's like, no, it's because I'm a businessman, and when you want to do business within this particular industry of small businesses, you have to, the people who run things are the Muslim people, and they don't want to do business with people who are not of Muslim faith. So I became that. So it was the most convenient thing for me to do. In many ways, in our history, it would have been more convenient for you to be Christian, if you wanted to navigate the world more than it would have been for you to be something else, because the system did not allow for that. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that, one, there are belief systems that are more resonant for some people than there are. It is not a one size fits all, but it's difficult, for the deeply religious people to believe that other faiths it's not about truth. It's about resonance.
Yeah.
Because resonance they feel like it's a choice, but resonance is not a choice.
Yeah.
And the challenge with resonance is that it's the difference between what is right and what feels right.
So, do we have more people seeking spirituality today? Because it almost feels like Christianity, let me use that example, or even the interest in the Bible, seem to be rising again. On TikTok, you see, people who are like going back to church, like Catholics. There's like a whole movement. And I don't know if that's just what we see portrayed on social media, but it seems like people are seeking spirituality. And I don't know if that has got to do with the world we live in today. COVID, you were so we were individualistic in that way. In fact, circumstances forced us to be that.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of challenges we're dealing with in today's world that are unexplained and sometimes will force you to find an answer somewhere.
Yeah.
Do you think we're seeking more and more? And if that's the case, why? Because also, sorry, Vusumzi, I pick up a lot from even people around me who are beginning to ask questions. So they're trying to explore, like they read spiritual books that may have nothing to do with their own belief systems. They are asking questions that their religious leaders have always told them, don't question certain things. And I wonder what is behind that.
What I can say to that is that in times of chaos, in times of turmoil, people lean towards spirituality, right? A lot of people had their spiritual awakening during COVID. There are a lot of people who, because of the isolation, because of the way in which the world stopped making sense and the uncertainty of it. If we were to look at the stats around 2020, 2021, there was a spike in church attendance, or rather not even church attendance because we couldn't go to church, but in religious interest. TikTok blew up with a lot of spirituality. The socials blew up with a lot of spirituality. There is a way in which the human spirit tries to find some meaning in the world. And the irony of it is that the countries that are less religious are the countries that are more economically stable.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, right? It's ironic in the sense that in church or, in a lot of faith, we're made to believe that if you believe strong enough, your life becomes better. If you have a good relationship with God, your life becomes better. But the people who do have a better life are actually less religious. They believe less in God. But in terms of numbers, the numbers of, let's say, Christianity, for instance, the actual number of Christians has not changed, has changed by like 1% in 100 years. In 100 years, it has changed by about 1% only. There's been 1% difference in the past 100 years. The shift that is happening is that it is not the number of people, it is who these people are. What has happened is that gradually over the past couple of decades, the number of Christians in the West has steadily declined. It has, and in some instances, it has tanked.
And yet
altogether.
in sub-Saharan Africa,
and then in sub-Saharan Africa,
it's rising.
It is rising, right?
Interesting.
Just a basic fact: the median age of a Christian in the West, in America, in Europe, the median age of a Christian is 45 years old. In Africa, it's 19 years old, right? And there are in the West, for every 3 people that leave Christianity, only 1 joins, right? So Christianity in the West is dying, and is dying in such a way that it is not a steep decline whereby something can happen and turn it back up. It is happening over such a prolonged period of time that it's getting worked out of people's system. Whereby it is like, it's easier when something happens gradually. It is harder and harder to get out of it rather than when it happens all of a sudden,
Could that be because you've indicated that in these countries where the economy is stable, could it be because just inherently as human beings, when we can do things for ourselves, and I say that in inverted commas, so you've got a job, the economy is stable, education is guaranteed, healthcare is guaranteed, then you somehow feel like you don't necessarily need the superpower that can solve your issues. But when you are in some parts of the country where you are below the poverty line, where there's still a need of some sorts, then you still feel the need to appeal to a higher power that can solve some of your issues. And once again, I want to preface this by saying, of course, there are exceptions. That's why you've got rich people who can still believe, even when they can do things for themselves. But I do think that those are exceptions in a way. Do you find that, I'm trying to understand, why is it that in these places where the economy is so stable, people are able to do stuff for themselves, it seems to be declining, religion or spirituality, and yet you've got places like Southern Africa where it's rising. What could be the explanation then?
Ego.
Uh-huh.
When you start believing that you have done everything yourself and you have no need, and there's no, and science has answered all your questions, and science has convinced you that all there is your physical effort, and weird things like if you work hard, things will work out for you. You believe in yourself, and you believe in the capacity of you as a human being, and then that severs, it completely cuts your relationship to that. In all the things that you have done, you're still relatively nothing in the broader scheme of things.
Yeah. Because there are people who believe that their hard work is what works. They don't pray, they don't believe in a God or a superpower, but they are successful. And then you've got other people who equally will believe that I'm nothing without God. God will answer my prayers, and yet they've been praying for the last 10 years for God to heal their daughter who's got cancer, or for God to give them employment, and they still don't have it. But I find that because of how spiritual we've become, we find justifications for the failures, quote unquote, for lack of a better word, in our prayers. So if you've been praying for your mom to be healed and your mom still dies, sadly, 3 weeks later, there's a justification of, no, but it's the will of God.
Yes.
But if you pray for your mom to be healed from cancer and 3 weeks later your mom is in remission, it's look at God.
Yes.
So there's no space for God to falter.
Yeah.
He's always a good God. Yes. But if he doesn't answer my prayers, then no, he's not a bad God. It's just his will.
Yes.
Because we always find the justification.
Because we have a transactional relationship. If I do this, this must happen.
This must happen.
Which is not the case.
We'll get into more of that after the latest in Eyewitness News headlines. It's 10:32.
7:02.
The Clement Manyathela Show.
Let's walk the talk.
It's 24 minutes before 11 o'clock. We're speaking to Vusumzi Ngxande. We have started a new feature today. We're going to do this monthly, but I'm enjoying this chat so much that I wish we were doing this feature every single week. We call it Exploring Spirituality with Vusumzi Ngxande. And I want you to join the conversation on 011-883-0702. If anything piqued your interest, or you've got a question, or you are exploring something, you've got an input, you can send your WhatsApps as well on 0727021702. Let's start with Makosonke, who's calling us from Jabulani in Soweto. Makosonke, good morning.
Good morning, and to your guest as well, Clement.
Sure.
Clement, in my journey, what I've realized with the issue of faith is that one of the things that I made a mistake with was not understanding the biblical principles, and also not understanding the translation in Hebrew and Greek, so that at the end of the day, I understand the meaning of what I'm reading. Because sometimes when you understand something by just reading it, you might miss the meaning if ever you don't know the translation of Hebrew or Greek with regards to whatever it is that you want to understand it. And actually, I'm more focusing on the issue of why some people would be successful even though they don't believe. Do you understand? And the issue is that I won't even also discard the fact that God doesn't play a role in my life, because there are certain things that are spiritual that I cannot explain in terms of saying that why this thing has happened. Because some things, like for example, you remember I just told you that I have a problem with my marriage. Certain things I just pray about them. Do you understand? And I see change, not because of I've implemented certain principles in terms of maybe doing certain things, but just starting seeing change by the virtue of understanding that I have a creator that created me. Do you understand? There is a power beyond what is happening regarding to my life. So basically, for me, is that one thing that delays a lot of believers, especially those who believe in the Bible, is the fact that they don't doing that from those two issues that I've raised, which is the applying biblical principle and also understanding the meaning through Greek and Hebrew.
Okay, Makosonke. Thank you so much for your thoughts. I'll get Vusumzi to reflect on that if he's got some reflections. Sizwe, you're in Pinville. Good morning.
Morning, Clement, and morning to your guest as well.
Go ahead.
Morning, sir.
I also want to touch on the aspect of reason in religion generally. It has been my experience that most religion, if not some, do not encourage rationale or reason or something which I call the courage to doubt. The courage to doubt. By that I mean I imply that we must not be shy to question God, so that our faith can develop stronger by questioning God. And so I believe through rationale and engaging robustly with some of the doctrines in some particular religion, we might be able to develop stronger and much more deeper faith. Most of the things that are being questioned are called heresy. So they are beginning to be heretic or haram in Islam. I have a friend who's a Muslim, and I asked him one day, I say, why is it that you guys, Muslims, can marry a Christian woman and convert her to a Muslim, but a Christian guy can't marry a Muslim woman? And he says to me, no, it's the law. I say, no, but love knows no religion, knows no color. But why he says, no, now you're beginning to attack my religion. He became emotional. I had to stop it. So rationale is the key.
Yeah. So Caesar, thank you so much for that. And Vusumzi, I was responding there and I said, who? Because it touched on my most favorite quote in a movie. I don't know if you've watched Conclave. Check it out, the movie Conclave. There's one of my favorite
one that
actors.
ended up turning out into real life situation.
Yeah, it did. So his name is Ralph Fiennes, this actor on Conclave. Fiennes.
Yes.
Thank you. In the movie, he says, this is my favorite quote in the movie. He says, and I quote, "Our faith is a living thing precisely because it walks hand in hand with doubt. If there was only certainty and no doubt, there would be no mystery, and therefore no need for faith." And when he uttered those words in that film, I thought, oh my God, that's it. But religion teaches you not to doubt.
Yes.
And yet it cannot exist without doubt. Because if you have certainty, what's the point? Do you find then that, because what he's raising there is rationale. I do also, by the way, think spiritual things are not always going to be rational.
Yeah.
That's why people believe in miracles, like you suddenly are healed or because you prayed. So some things you can't really reason and rationally explain them because it's spirituality. They're not meant to be explainable. What do you think?
That quote is actually very important, and based on what Sis was bringing up about the courage to question. Story time. So in the 1500s, there was a time in Christianity where you could buy your way out of hell, where you could pay money to get out of hell,
so that you don't end up in hell.
So you leave earlier. So in Catholicism, there's a place called purgatory.
Yes.
So purgatory is basically where it's not like hell per se, but it's where your soul gets cleansed.
It's in between.
It's an in-between space where but it's a place of suffering where your soul gets cleansed through suffering. So there was a time in Catholicism whereby you could do certain things to reduce the amount of time that you spend in purgatory. It could be like prayers, going to certain holy sites. But around the 1500s, you could pay money to get out of hell. If you pay certain amount of money, there was like a ratio. If you pay this amount of money, you get 10 years out of hell. If you pay this amount, and this was a decree by the Pope at the time, right? So there was this guy called Martin Luther, who was a German monk, So one day he was going to Rome. He needed to report on something, and when he started getting an understanding of this thing of indulgences, he knew about it. But now when he was in Rome, he's seeing it how it's like, Rome at the time was like New York. It was like debauchery, and people could do, especially the wealthy, they could do a lot of things because they knew that they had money. They weren't going to spend any time to pay for their sins, right? So he decided to challenge that. So this one monk, he challenged the entire Roman Catholic Church. He had, as Jesus says, the courage to question. And he was like, how do we know? He asked a simple question. How do you know it actually works? How do you actually know that this money that you've paid will actually work? Because at the time, it was a situation whereby you could go to a particular church. He went to a particular church, and you had to crawl up the stairs. If you crawl up the stairs on your knees, on your hands and knees, and reciting the Lord's Prayer, you get 250 years off. And he did that. And I think the stairs just abused his knees. So he gets to the top of the stairs. That's when he has this moment. He's like, nah, this is nonsense. So then in 1517, he goes, he basically nails, he has this charter called the 95 Theses that he nails onto the church door to say, this thing is actually rubbish. These are the laws that we as a church actually need to abide by, right? With that action, Martin Luther gave birth to every single church that you know. That was the Protestant movement. So every church, Methodists, like Presbyterian, Mapostola, every single church that you know was born out of Martin Luther having the courage to challenge the church, to say. And the interesting thing is, people think that when you challenge religion, you're challenging God. He said, this is not about the Bible. Take the Bible and put it, I'm questioning religion. I'm questioning the church. And these 95 theses are how the church must conduct itself, not how people must relate to the Bible, because it is the religion that is corrupting people, not God and not the Bible.
And religious leaders don't want people to be spiritual, because spirituality requires for you to have that personal relationship and ask questions and be satisfied.
That's why it was illegal for people to read the Bible.
Somebody else had to tell you what it says.
People were not. They kept it in Latin because they didn't want people. The church said that it is sinful for people to read the Bible for themselves.
One of the things that shocked me is when I ask, my fellow Christian brothers and sisters, and I'm like, do you know how the Bible came about? A lot of them don't know. And I'm like, oh my God. So what? You think it just fell from heaven? Are you not interested in the context of how did the book of Paul make it there? How did these books,
the canonical books,
and did we have any other books that existed before? And who voted? Because there are politicians who voted for which books are going to be in the Bible. But that context, they don't care about it. And I get it, because maybe you care about the message. But for me, that worries me, that I'm believing in something and yet I don't know the origins of it. That worries me. And when you start questioning that, then you're seen as you're questioning God. Let's go to see these WhatsApp voice notes that have also come through on 0727021702.
Clement, is it still morning? Good morning. I'm not Christian. That is number one. I'm not Christian, and I'll never be, and I'll never force my kids to be Christians. The only thing I will do is to keep on my belief. I'm a spiritualist. That is number one. And I always tell people I'm a believer. Then they will say I'm confused. I'm not. I believe there's God, and I believe there's ancestors. I don't believe in anything that has to do with Jesus Christ. And the people who are confused are the ones who are thinking God and Jesus Christ is the same thing. Jesus was in a human form. God is a spiritual part of it. So, I'm not Christian. I'm just a spiritualist, and I'm a believer. To say, yeah, uNkulunkulu khona, and my ancestors are there. Anything that has to do with Jesus, nekala yakhe nah. And this.
Good morning, Clement and Vusi. I just joined in and I recognize the voice because I've been listening to all the podcasts. I've learned so much. Now I'm struggling to find a podcast that can capture the attention as much as Jenny Kwan do. I've learned a lot about my origin, but I've chosen to continue with Christianity, and I am now doing so with understanding and reflection on the context. Thank you so much, Vusi. Thank you.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's so cool.
It's really cool. I think we need to make it clear to people that we are not disparaging Christianity. I believe Christianity is an extremely important faith system for a lot of people. It is a crucial aspect of our society. But now, here's another reality that people may or may not know, especially black people, right? So we spoke a bit about the stats, about the number of Christians. There are now officially 70% of Christians are in what they call the global south. Right, and the numbers are in about 10 to 15 years are going to be 80%, right? And looking at all the things, the dynamics that are happening religiously around the world, the spiritual epicenter of Christianity, the center of gravity of Christianity, has shifted to Africa. I don't know how many Anglicans know this, but last week there was the biggest split in the history of the Anglican Church happened last week, whereby there was what they call the Global Anglican Communion broke away from the Anglican Church, the Church of England. This Global Anglican Communion is headed by Africans. They carry 80% of the Anglicans in the world within their congregations. And they decided to move away from the Church of England because the Africans believe that the Anglican Church, the Church of England, is no longer the true church. Right? So now, in more ways than one, spirituality from this moment onwards, as we know it, Christianity, is in the hands of Africans. The cycle of spirituality has shifted from the West into the South. And now, from this point onwards that we're in, it's not something that is coming. We are here now. The look, the identity, the character, the shape of Christianity from this point onwards is going to be decided by Africans. Right? And I don't know what that means to people. That from now on, we will never be able to say or associate Christianity with the West. The West has, in many ways, lost credibility. The mask has fallen off, as the Prime Minister of Canada said, it's not even a pretense anymore. The world order has shifted, The West no longer holds the moral high ground for anything because every day we switch on our television, we go online and we see what the West is doing, So now, the face of Christianity, the face of faith will no longer be associated with the Western world. And now the question is, now that we are here, it is like Africa's moment has actually arrived. Our spiritual moment that we thought was going to come. One day Africa will rise. Actually, it is here. And the tricky part about it is that we did not get here through merit. We get here through cycles because human society is governed by cycles. Civilizations rise and fall, right? Power moves from this place to it shifts. It's like winter. Winter right now is in another country. It's going to come here soon. So now we are in our moment. And whether or not it is going to work in a particular way, or rather what Christianity is going to mean to humanity is now going to be decided by Africans.
Yeah.
And the question is, what are they going to do about it?
Yeah.
Morning, Clement, and your guest. This is Ngxande here. I've got a question for your guest on religion. I mean, I was born 40 years ago into a Christian family, and I now have a child who's now 10, who's starting to understand what religions and that. So what I would like to know is, when I grew up, I understood that, you know, I'm Christian because when I was born, my parents were Christian and that. So at what age do we allow kids to then choose what they want to be? Because I'm also raising my son as Christian because that's what I was raised as. And I mean, at what should I wait for him to turn 18 and then he says, this is what I want to follow? It's a bit confusing for me there. When does one choose that now, you know, I'm going to let my kid choose what he wants? Thank you.
Hi, Clement. When it comes to spirituality, you know, I'm a Christian, so I find that, as your guest says, the relationship is presumed to be transactional. When I do this, God will do that. But I think in my walk with God, which is Jehovah, the God of the Bible, I've come to realize that we're not taught much about his sovereign power, meaning God does what he wants when he wants it. And I mean, maybe for me, that's what explains some of the answers that we get the opposite. If you pray for healing when someone doesn't get healed, then God has decided that person has to go. Or, you know, like that. Like it's not. It shouldn't be like, I do this, God does that. God does what he knows is best. That's when I think, for me, I need to trust in his sovereign power, sovereignty, that when something happens in a way that I did not want to happen, that's when I come to the point of, let his will be done. Because that's a prayer that we pray, that his will be done, let his kingdom come. So I think as Christians, I find that we're not taught much about his sovereign power, that he decides. He has a final word. Okay, that's how I understand it.
Could it be, Vusumzi, that and please, let's not forget that question about at what age do you then introduce religion? But I'm interested in this comment as well. Could it be that part of the reason is we think God is an emotional God? Or, you know, I listened to, on your podcast, the first time you did a live show, you had all these guests, and I listened to Gogo Obrimachikri.
Yes.
And he said something so profound. He said, as human beings, we have created our own God.
Yeah.
He says there's a God who exists. There's a source, a creator of all, that we are incapable as humans to understand and fathom what that creator looks like. But as human beings, because we're always trying to survive and understand, we've created our own God. That's why we've given him an identity.
An agenda.
We've given him a gender. We've given him all these characteristics. Because that's how we survive. We have to relate with something. We are uncomfortable as humans to relate with a thing we don't understand. And I thought that was so profound, and which is why I'm asking now. Maybe we actually have given this God an identity that he's an emotional God. That's why we think, okay, I can go fast and beg him for 1, 2, 3. But what if it doesn't happen?
I can share something else that he shared with me in our conversations, and we're talking about ancestors. And he says, when Ugogo comes to you, Omkulu comes to you, he comes to you in that form because that's what makes sense to you. He's like, if they were to come to you in spirit, in the actual spiritual form, you wouldn't even know what you're looking at. You know, so we create that interface, and in many ways, God, the being God, also understands that human beings do need an interface. That's why you have all these different religious leaders, like Jesus, like Buddha, like, you know, all around the world, because
Muhammad,
we don't, human beings were built in such a way that we need for things to look like us for us to be able to relate to it. If God came in a shape that we don't understand, or if Jesus was in a shape that we didn't understand, we would not be able to relate. That's why, you know, when people have pets, they're like, oh, you know, the more human-like the dog is, the more we seem to love the dog. Like, oh, he can listen, he can talk, he can do this thing, because that's what makes us comfortable. So in the question of what age to introduce religion to a child, I believe that your child was already introduced to God way before you said anything, because your child is watching you every day. Your child is watching you how you deal with things. Do you pray? You can't tell a child, no, Jesus is Lord, but you don't. It doesn't show in your life. You are going to teach your child the thing that you are, whether you want to or not. The things that you're going to say are only going to be secondary. When you are facing challenges and you go and pray and you bring God into the different situations in your life, that's how your child is learning about those. It has already happened. Right? So at the question of the age, it's not about the age. From birth, you're teaching your child about God because that's your God. What you can do, personally, what I believe is that you can explain to your child your beliefs. Explain to them, we are Christian because this is what makes sense to me. We are going to go to church. This is what makes sense to me. When you're older, you can then choose. But because how we function, let's say as a father in a family, or as a father, even outside of a family, I can say, this is how I live my life. Don't say, we believe in this, but you don't live by it. You can say, this is how I live my life. These are the principles. These are the spiritual principles. And this is the role that they play in my life.
Yeah. Okay, Vusumzi. Oh, I can't believe the time is up.
It flies.
Can I take just 5 minutes of your time after the news?
Yes,
please. Just 5 minutes of your time. To wrap up this conversation properly. I'm loving it, and I know a lot of our listeners are enjoying it too. It's a minute before 11. Manyathela Show. Thank you for staying with us. I want us to wrap up exploring spirituality with Vusumzi Ngxande. When you have these conversations, you wish you were having them for 2 hours.
Right.
But they're only scheduled for an hour. So I just want to take just 5 minutes of Vusumzi's time to just go through some of the messages you've sent, and we wrap up this conversation. But don't worry. He's going to be with us every single month, once a month. We're going to bring him to have a chat with us as we explore this concept of spirituality together. So let's go to some WhatsApp voice notes that you also sent on 072 702 1702.
Clement, fascinating and emotive topic. Thanks for bringing it up. Quickly, our religions are a function of who colonized us. If we were colonized by the people who colonized the so-called Francophone, and the British colonized Upper Africa, you know that we would be wearing those dresses doing Islam. So it is a function of who colonizes you. But most importantly, we must all remember that Christianity especially was a vehicle for the imperialistic ambitions of the racists who wanted to do as they please with us and with our resources. We all know that the annals of religious history are just littered with blood and corruption and racism. So that is the most important thing to have uppermost in our minds.
Clement, I must give it to you. Great show. Clement, I agree with your guest. There is a direct correlation between poverty and religion. The poorest countries in the world, the poorest people in the world tend to be more religious. True, there is an exception. America, for example, very religious. However, if you look at the countries that enjoy the highest standards of living in the world, the Nordic and Scandinavian countries, those countries are not religious at all, yet the people enjoy prosperity. Thank you.
Good morning, Clement and 702 listeners. Lima Vusani, mo studio. You're talking a topic, Clement, that is very sensitive. Clement, I intend to agree with what Vusi is saying, based on the spiritual belief that we have as people. It's systematic, as Vusi is saying. There is systematic to it. Hence, you find people in developed countries. You never hear them praying for God help me to pay my rent, to take my child to school or have school fees. money, because the developing countries, they are already supply that. Here in the southern countries, you hear people saying praying for paying rent, praying for work. That is systematic. I do agree with Mavusani. It's Max here from Honeydew.
Oh, thank you so much. We've got so many other WhatsApp voice notes that we can't get through to. But Vusi, how about we do part 2?
Let's do part 2
of this, yeah?
It's going to be
Can
fun.
you just wrap it all up for us? Just the last word from what you've heard, and then we will, when you come back next month, we'll do part 2 of this conversation and pick up from where we left off.
I'll take the last message now, right? Where we say that the Western countries, the Scandinavian countries, the Western countries are not religious, and the countries that have a lot of poverty are more religious. The question is, who brought that poverty to those African countries? Who created that system whereby we need to pray for rent? The system that those people built are benefiting from it. The people who brought us the religion are benefiting from the system that created the poverty that we live in. So the fact that those countries are less religious is not a reflection of spirituality itself, but it's a reflection of the system that they built, right? In that it does not exonerate them. The West, the wealth of the West is built on the destruction of the global South and the exploitation of the global South. So we absolutely cannot see the wealth of the West and say there's some kind of moral achievement, because it's not. The reason they don't have to pray for rent is because they're taking all our resources. So that does not ever think that we can equate the idea of being more affluent and less religious as a kind of a moral achievement, because it's not, right? So another thing that we have to remember is that now we've been talking about history, what happened, and I want to emphasize that now Christianity is literally now in the hands of Africans, and what are Africans going to do about it?
That's it. Vusumzi, thank you so much for joining us. This was Exploring Spirituality with Vusumzi Ngxande. Go check out the podcast if you want to follow up on this conversation, but go check out his podcast as well. He's got a podcast, Jenny Kwantu, exploring African spirituality and identity. He's got a book as well titled Jenny Kwantu. I've listened to the podcast, I've read the book. I thought they were so insightful. So if you're interested to really learn, and not from someone who is being prescriptive to you about what you should believe in, who is open-minded, you want to listen to that podcast or get yourself that book by Vusumzi Ngxande. Thank you so much, brother. See you next month.